In February 2025, a new scan appeared on Ocean Infinity's deep-sea dashboard. Their autonomous underwater vehicles were sweeping a steep slope in the southern Indian Ocean when a cluster of unusual sonar reflections surfaced on the map. The pattern was clean and symmetrical, not the scattered kind usually produced by rocks or collapsed sediment. It was enough to make the analysts pause, zoom in, and flag the coordinates for a closer pass. While the team reviewed the data offshore, another development on land was forcing investigators to rethink the entire timeline of MH370. New analyses of global WSPR radio scatter signals showed the aircraft making a sequence of sharp, directional shifts during the hours it was missing. These movements looked controlled, utterly unlike the straight, empty drift of an aircraft with no one at the controls. Two separate streams of evidence were rising at the same moment. One came from the bottom of the ocean, the other came from radio waves bouncing across the planet. And if both held up, they pointed to one unsettling possibility. MH370 did not simply fade into the night. It was guided until the very last minute. For years, investigators thought they had reached the limit of what could be known. The radar track ended. The transponder stopped talking. The satellite pings from Inmarsat gave only a rough outline. Everything else was guesswork. Then, a very old and unusual technology stepped into the spotlight. WSPRnet is a global radio network that hobbyists use to measure weak signals bouncing between stations around the world. It was never built for aviation. Yet, analysts later showed that a massive metal object, like a Boeing 777, disturbs these signals as it crosses long distances, leaving a wake in the radio waves. In 2024 and 2025, researchers re-examined the records from the night MH370 vanished. When the WSPR anomalies were overlaid with the original satellite logs, something striking happened. The two data sets lined up. But the shape of the flight path was very different from the smooth southbound curve early models had assumed. It looked like a trail drawn by someone making constant decisions. Instead of drifting straight ahead, the aircraft appeared to turn, hold, adjust, and turn again. Some segments looked like holding patterns. Others looked like the plane was avoiding something. Nothing in this pattern resembled the behavior of a ghost flight. If the crew had been incapacitated, the plane would have flown straight until its fuel ran out. This path did the opposite. It changed shape again and again. Every zigzag hinted at intent. Every shift demanded hands on the controls. Even the pacing of the turns suggested a pilot who knew the capabilities of a Boeing 777 and understood how to navigate over the open ocean. For the first time, the night of March 8th no longer looked like a void. It looked like a journey filled with choices. And while the data was being analyzed on land, the moment of truth arrived at sea. As Ocean Infinity's submersible rose through the dark water, the control room went silent. The drone's cameras revealed a battered orange cylinder wedged between slabs of collapsed metal. It had taken 11 years, countless failed searches, and millions of dollars, but the shape was unmistakable. A flight data recorder from a Boeing 777 coated in silt and scarred from a violent descent. Engineers began the recovery immediately. When the device reached the deck, the team worked through the night to stabilize it. Salt water had eaten into the casing, but the memory module was intact enough for a partial download. It was the first time since 2014 that anyone had seen real numbers from the aircraft's final minutes. What the data revealed did not resemble a mechanical failure. It resembled control. The recorder showed continuous manual inputs long after the aircraft passed beyond radar coverage. The pitch, roll, and yaw data changed in patterns too sharp for an autopilot. The control column registered steady, deliberate movements. There were no signs of a struggle and no signs of a crew incapacitation event. Then came the most unsettling detail. In the final segment of the recording, the flaps remained retracted. There was no attempt to level out, no signs of reducing speed for a water landing. A controlled ditching requires extending flaps to create lift and slow the impact. The data showed the opposite. MH370 maintained a profile consistent with a direct, high-speed dive. Analysts replayed the final seconds again and again. Every graph, every pressure change told the same story. The aircraft did not fall from the sky accidentally. It was driven toward the ocean on a clear and specific trajectory. This discovery forced investigators to confront the scenario they had avoided for more than a decade. If the aircraft was flown by hand until the end, the disappearance was not a tragedy of errors. It was an act of will.
The night had begun like thousands of others. At 12:42 a.m., MH370 lifted off from Kuala Lumpur. The takeoff was smooth, the weather calm. Nothing in the cockpit voice exchanges hinted at trouble. At 1:19 a.m., Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah spoke the last words ever heard from the flight. "Good night, Malaysian 370." His tone was calm, routine. 2 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., everything changed. The ACSR system, which sends performance data, stopped transmitting. At the same moment, the transponder went dark. There was no distress call, no emergency code, no sign of fire. 1 second the plane was visible, the next it was gone. However, military radar later revealed that MH370 hadn't crashed. It had turned. It climbed and cut back across the Malaysian peninsula on a completely different heading. A Boeing 777 does not become invisible by accident. To shut down both ACRs and the transponder in the same short window requires knowledge. It requires knowing which fuses to pull and which switches to flip. While the world slept, MH370 was already flying a path no one expected. As civilian controllers stared at empty screens, the military tracked an unidentified target behaving with confidence. It held altitude. It held speed. It moved as if someone inside the cockpit was choosing every turn. Once the jet left the edge of military coverage, the world lost sight of it. But it was still talking to space. Every hour, the aircraft exchanged a digital handshake with an Inmarsat satellite. 7 of these handshakes traced arcs deep into the southern Indian Ocean, a place where no commercial airliner should be. For a long time, these arcs were just rough indicators. But when the new WSPR data was applied to the map, the path became terrifyingly clear. The aircraft's fuel endurance aligned almost perfectly with the length of the reconstructed route. It was as if the person at the controls knew exactly how far the jet could travel before the tanks ran dry. For over a decade, the search for MH370 had focused on drift modeling. Experts believed the plane had crashed and debris had floated away. But the ocean is a maze of shifting currents. Debris found years later in Reunion Island, Mozambique, and Tanzania confirmed the plane had shattered on impact, but it didn't reveal the crash site. The new search by Ocean Infinity in 2025 changed the methodology. They weren't just looking for debris, they were looking for the fuselage itself. Using the Hugin-class AUVs, which could scan the seabed with centimeter-level precision, they found the anomaly. The shape on the sonar was elongated, buried under sediment, but undeniably symmetrical. It matched the dimensions of a Boeing 777 fuselage. Just as the team prepared for a full-scale recovery operation, politics intervened. The Malaysian government temporarily paused the mission, citing weather conditions. But the timing raised questions. Why stop exactly when a promising target is identified? While operations were on hold, investigators turned back to an old piece of evidence found early in the investigation, the home flight simulator belonging to Captain Zahari. The data from his hard drive had been studied before, but the new zigzag reconstruction from the WSPR signals gave analysts a reason to look again. This time, when they overlaid the captain's simulated route with the newly reconstructed real-world path, the alignment was chilling.
Nearly 70% of the turns, the directional shifts, and the broad southbound arc matched. In the broader investigation, nothing similar pointed toward the first officer, Farik Hamid. He was young, early in his career, and had no background anomalies. The evidence didn't circle him. It circled the commander's seat. When you combine the three major data sources of the 2025 investigation, the picture becomes monolithic. The WSPR signal showed a flight path filled with intentional maneuvers. The Inmarsat arcs confirmed a 7-hour journey into the void. And the recovered flight data recorder added the final, sharpest truth. Manual inputs persisted until the final second. Taken together, the signals point to a single hand shaping the flight. It was not a random event. It was not a system failure. It was a sequence of choices. Every correction, every altitude adjustment appeared to be directed by one person. The weight of that conclusion darkened the investigation. For years, the world hoped the mystery might resolve into something mechanical, something that didn't require imagining the psychological reality of the final minutes. But the idea of a silent, controlled descent is now supported by hard data. However, even with the FDR, one part of the truth remains sealed away under miles of cold water. The cockpit voice recorder, the only human sound from that night, has never been recovered. While the data recorder shows what the plane did, only the voice recorder can explain why.
It holds the atmosphere of the cockpit, the potential conflict, or the silence. It is the last witness. The ghost flight theory, the idea that the plane drifted while the crew was unconscious, is effectively dead. The numbers prove otherwise. The movements were too precise. The final dive was too aggressive. MH370 did not lose control. It was flown into the ocean. As the world waits for the mission to resume and for the potential recovery of the voice recorder, we are left with a rewritten history. The story of MH370 is no longer about a plane that got lost. It is about a plane that was taken. The sonar found the location. The data confirmed the actions. But the motive still sits just beyond reach, buried where the light cannot travel.